Hello, my name is Robin Kay, and I'm going to talk with you about exploring gender differences and how pre-service teachers learn to use technology. I will talk a bit about the context and the research problem, the purpose of the study, the method, the results, and future research. Technology in education is a big deal. It is ubiquitous in education, and it is very important in teacher education programs. Kay in 1992, however, discovered that there were gender differences in favor of males in terms of their attitudes, use, and behavior towards learning technology and interacting with computers. However, there is limited research on learning and specifically with respect to pre-service teachers and how they learn. And that's important because if pre-service teachers who are the future of education don't know how to use technology or have troubles learning with technology, we need to address that problem. And specifically, if there are gender biases in favor of males, for example, that is a problem we need to address for sure to figure out how we work on this inequity. The purpose of this study then is to look at gender differences in pre-service teachers and how they learn new technology. The idea here is if there are biases in the way we teach pre-service teachers how to use technology and they favor one gender over the other, we will need to address that problem. This specific study worked with 153 pre-service teachers, 103 females and 50 males in a small suburban university in Canada. And the students were focused on math and science with their teachable subject areas. In terms of learning and measuring how students learn, we looked at four constructs based on a scale, the Learning Strategies Survey developed by Kay in 2006, and that focused on four constructs: collaboration, formal instruction, exploratory learning, and authentic tasks. So collaboration would be working with others while learning. Formal instruction would be a workshop or someone standing up in the front and explaining. Exploratory learning might involve trial and error in terms of playing with software, and authentic tasks would involve learning but with a specific purpose in mind, other than just learning the technology. So let's look at the results and decipher this table. Here are the four constructs: collaboration, authentic tasks, formal instruction, and exploratory learning. You can see the maximum scores here for these constructs. And females scored significantly higher than males in the collaboration construct. That means that collaboration seemed to work significantly better for females than males. Same for authentic tasks. Females seem to prefer or got more help when they were doing authentic tasks versus males. There were no differences with respect to preference or helpfulness of learning strategies when focusing on formal instruction or exploratory learning. I'm going to take a look at each of these constructs in more detail. So let's look at collaboration. Well, we measured four items. However, only working with a friend proved to be significantly more effective for females than males. Asking face-to-face questions or working with a group of people or emailing questions to an instructor or a friend, there were no significant differences. Now, this is odd because if you'll look back here, there actually was a significant difference between males and females in using authentic tasks. But when you actually look at the individual items, there were no significant differences. The closest one was teaching with computers, but that wasn't significant. So as a whole, females may prefer authentic tasks, but when we look at each of these individual items, there are no significant preference differences. And let's look at formal instruction. And if we look at the three items, attending workshops and online tutorials and using a help menu, females significantly preferred attending workshops. They found them more helpful than males. But the other two items, there were no significant differences. And finally, with respect to exploration, systematic, slow trial and error, as opposed to random trial and error, appeared to be more helpful for females than males, or was rated as more helpful. So let's take a look at the summary of the results. We see here a slight gender bias in favor of females with a preference or a rating of working with friends and attending workshops and systematic trial and error. Those three areas were rated higher in terms of helpfulness for females than males. So that's actually different from the previous research by Kay, where there was actually biases in favor of males. However, we don't want bias either way. So focusing on a variety of teaching approaches is suggested when in a teacher education program to maximize the benefit. Now the benefit of teaching methods. Now there may be other methods that we didn't look at that would be helpful. So that is worth looking at in terms of future research. In terms of limitations, we have a relatively small sample size and one small university, so obviously we'd have to replicate these results with larger sample sizes. It's a self-assessment of helpfulness, so we don't really know that they were more helpful, these strategies. It's just that they were rated as more helpful by females in certain instances. So these are ratings of helpfulness. And of course, this is math and science focused program, and it might be very different for universities or programs where teachers are focusing on history or social sciences or kindergarten, for example. Then those teachers may have a different preferences in terms of learning. So what about future research? Well, we probably want to look at direct observation of learning in some way to see, actually directly observe the impact of these methods. And one approach might be to do a think aloud protocol. And that involves literally thinking out loud while the screen is recorded and while someone is learning. And so we could see maybe more in-depth analysis of how students are learning based on certain approaches. We would also benefit probably from focus groups and asking males and females what they prefer and why, and individual interviews as well. So we could do individual interviews or focus groups. So that is a brief summary of gender differences in how pre-service teachers learn new technology.